I know everyone's been asking for it, and it's here finally, a video on how to paint doors. Well, sort of. I actually picked up these WizKid doors because I thought they'd be a good test case for practicing some different techniques on painting stone and wood. And there's two doors in the set, so that gives us two completely different techniques we can use. We're going to paint one as a castle door above ground, dry, and then one more of a dungeon looking door, something more wet and dark. And starting off with our castle door, I'm beginning with a base coat of Vallejo Game Color Earth. You have a wide variety of color choices when it comes to painting stone. However, stone from the same quarry is going to roughly have the same color to it, but there will be some color variations. And I decided to add some variations to our door here to make it a little bit more interesting. For this one, we are keeping the color changes very subtle and very slight. So far, all I did was add a little bit of flat brown to our earth, and I'm just picking out some of the individual stones. And then on a few of the other stones, I am picking them out with some green brown. For the highlights, we are using some Desert Yellow, and I'm just dry brushing over all the stones, which is going to help blend them in all together a bit more. So they're going to look a bit more uniform. Don't worry, I do have a different way of doing this, which we'll show on the next door if you want your stones to stand out more than what I'm doing here. Our next highlight color is Buff, and concentrating this mainly on just the edges of the stone doorway. And then we give the entire thing a wash using a mix of sepia and black inks. And you can see that's really blending together our different stone effects. So they almost look a bit too similar, I will admit. However, like I said, second part on the second door, we will go over a different way of doing this. Otherwise, you can also add a bit more of your alternate colors to your stones if you want your alternating stones to stand out more. Once that wash is dry, we apply a second wash, this time a bit more concentrated and a bit more black mixed in, and just trying to get into all the crevices in between the stones. You can actually use a lighter color for this as well to simulate mortar, but this particular piece I really didn't see mortar between any of the cracks, and I thought it would look a bit unusual, so we're going for a dark color here. The wash, of course, is going to darken our highlights quite a bit, so I wanted to punch a few of them up a bit more, just the edges of the rocks. So I went back with, boy, I hope I get this right, green, brown, desert yellow, and buff all mixed together to get the proper shade. And just putting them on carefully with the brush, trying to pick out some of the cracks, the edges of the rocks. Also, I'm using a very slight stippling method, so rather than a smooth line on this rough jagged stone, it's more of individual points are getting highlighted rather than just a straight edge. Let's move on to the door now. Since we're painting a castle, I'm assuming a well-maintained castle, we need a well-maintained door. And to me, that means dark, rich colors. And we want to go with the dark wood because that's going to contrast very well with our lighter, more light brown color of our stone. So I've undercoated the door with some model color Camo Black Brown, and now I'm giving it a very heavy dry brush of game color Beasty Brown. To the Beasty Brown, I've added an equal amount of Filthy Brown, and you can see we're dry brushing much softer now, trying to leave some of that Beasty Brown still showing through. And then finally, straight Filthy Brown, very light dry brush. And then after that, I highlighted some of the slats up and down the wood because I wanted to highlight the areas where the wash is eventually going to go between the planks, so we get a really good contrast between those points. For the door straps, we are going with a very, very dark coat of Vallejo Model Air Gunmetal mixed with black paint. Want a very dark black iron look, which I believe I did a very brief Google search and I can only find modern equivalents, but I believe this was some sort of ferrous oxide or something that was mixed with the iron to give it a black color, make it more resistant to rust, because once again, we're painting a nice neat door here. We don't want one that's all rusty just yet. And for the highlights, the same mixture, just with a little bit more of the gun gray added. I don't want a polished shiny door. Remember, this is iron. It's not going to have the same sheen as polished metal or stainless steel, but I still wanted a little something there. And then we finish off with some slightly thinned black ink, and we're just going to put it in the slats between the wood and around all the straps, metal straps around the door. Don't want to darken or blacken the door too much by putting it all over. I still want to keep a more rich, clean look to the wood. Now for the crest, and we're going to paint this with some Vallejo Model Air Rust. And I went with this color, this bronze brass color here, because I wanted one element on both doors to be kind of the same. We're going to paint them both brass colors, but this one's going to be nice and clean, and the one on the other door is going to be more oxidized and aged and not polished. So we're going to kind of paint this two different ways for two different effects. For our highlights, we are going with some Brassy Brass. And then for our shade, a heavy wash mix of charred brown mixed with black. And with that, our nice clean door is done. So now we're going to work on our dungeon door. So on to our dank dungeon door, and for that we're going to go with a gray color, and we want to keep this a bit darker. Also want to work in some greens to it, so we have some mold or what have you growing on the stones. We are beginning with a mix of game color cold gray mixed with some German field gray. To that mixture, I have added some game color Bonewhite, and we begin applying our first highlight. After a second highlight with more of the Bonewhite added, like with the previous door, I then took a regular brush and started to pick out the edges of the stone, so those will stand out a bit more. And yes, I know, I need a haircut. And then for our wash, a mix of black and black green Vallejo inks. On our first door, we blended in the different stones because we put the same dry brush and wash over all of them all at once. This time, I'm going to show you how to make them stand out a bit differently because we're going to actually paint and wash them individually. So after the wash is dry, I'm doing the second color stones now. This is a mix going back to our cold gray, and I have it mixed about 50% with German gray. And for our highlights, German gray, German field gray, and Stonewall gray. We got a lot of grays going on here. And then for the final highlight, some Bonewhite mixed into our very gray mixture. And then for our wash, just straight black ink. So a little bit different than what we used. We're not adding any green into this one, and that's going to help it stand out, look a little bit different from the rest of our stones. And then for our third stone color, yes, we're not done. I'm giving you a ton of stone recipes here. This is a mix of German gray mixed with USA olive drab. And then to that, I've now added some US tanned earth and some of our original cold gray. Yes, I have gone mad painting stones. This sounds really complicated, and maybe it is a bit too much for everyone when it comes to painting just a rock. But the point I want to make here is there's a lot of variation in a single stone. Lots of different colors that you'll find if you just go out and find rocks somewhere and look at them. You got grays mixed with browns and other colors, blues, and they're quite beautiful in a way. So don't be afraid about mixing odd colors in when you highlight your stones. You can start with a gray stone and work it up to a brown stone and things like that. So I'm just doing some colors here that I think would work best for what I need. But you could have fun with stones, play around with the colors. And then you know the drill by now. Rough edge highlight, this time using just the US tanned earth. And then we finish off with a wash of black ink mixed with a little bit of the green black ink. Since this is a darker color, this wash is a little bit heavier than what we used on other areas. We need an appropriate dank color for our dark dungeon door, and I've undercoated with Vallejo Model Color US Olive Drab, and now I'm giving it a heavy dry brush by mixing in some Game Color Earth to that. For the second highlight, I've added some green and gray to that previous mixture and proceeding to give it a slightly lighter dry brush. To add to the look of a wet, slightly rotting door, now going with a glaze of green ink, concentrating this mostly on the bottom where water would collect, most likely. And then we finish up by painting in the slats with some slightly thinned black ink, just like we did on the previous door. This one I'm working in a little bit more into the planks because I do want a darker door. Wet wood's going to be a lot darker than dry wood. For all the hardware, we're going for a more rusted, less well-maintained look. So we want a heavy rust, but we have to keep it dark because this is not in rust in the sunshine in a dry climate where you're going to get much more powdery orange rust. So we want to keep it darker, more dank. And for that, I'm using a mix. It's a Camo Black Brown mixed with some Black Red. For the highlights, we are using Game Color Beasty Brown and trying to speckle them on so we get a nice broken pattern up like one would see with rust. And then the final highlight, some Parasite Brown, lightly applied on the large rivets and around the edges, once again in a broken pattern. And then we finish off with a wash of black and brown ink mixed. Finally, the CREST, and we are starting off with Model Air Rust, just like we did on the other CREST. Started that because I kind of wanted to do the same CREST in two different states of disrepair. And to the Rust, we are giving it a very heavy wash of military green. To the military green, I've added some Game Color Jade Green and working that a little bit deeper into the recesses. And then we finish that off by going back to our original rust color and just giving a light dry brushing, just a little sheen on some of the more exposed parts of our crest. And a light coat of matte varnish, and we are done with our doors. Yay! So now I have two doors and no dungeon to put them in. Whiz kids, you gotta start working on dungeon tiles. But yeah, there you go. So now you know how to paint doors, but actually this was a little test case in different ways of painting stone and wood. As I said previously, there's a number of different ways to paint stone. It's kind of hard to get it wrong. What I will recommend is just don't go for the straight gray stone color. Work in some different colors. You can work in browns and ivory colors, and as we did here, greens. There's lots of different things you can do with stone. Just search on the internet for rocks and stone. You'll find a lot of different colors you can copy. I gave you a number of different recipes. You can just pick one out of here and do it yourself, or even alternate it slightly. You can substitute some of the colors and come up with something new, and it look much more interesting than just gray. So there you go. Hope this helped, and as always, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Popsicle, popsicle, fresh fruit ice is on a stick.